Welcome back to Allison Customs Project Car TV, and today I have another small project on the Chevelle. About done wiring this car. I've got a couple of things I'm going to change up that I don't like the way I did, kind of thing. So, you know, it's one of those things where you kind of go back over all your work and you go, oh, I could have done this a little better or a little differently. So, but that being besides today's issue. Today, one of the things I need to do, besides clear up these last few wires, is this bundle of wires that comes out of the compartment here goes back and goes each side and feeds the parts of the rest of the car. When the subwoofer box is in here, these wires are right underneath it, and you can see them. You can see all this coming up. So what I've decided I want to do is build a small cover, and it only needs to go back as far as that hump. Let me zoom in a little bit. So the cover I want to make needs to be, you know, 3 or 4 inches wide here, and needs to go back, and it just needs to go back as far as that hump. And it's just aesthetics. It's just hiding the wiring a little better than it is. When I originally did it like this, I thought the subwoofer box was going to be out a little further, in my mind at least, and that would essentially hide it all under the box. But it doesn't. You can see this right there, and I don't really care for that. So what we're going to do is just make a little cover, hides that, and we'll paint it the same gray and black speckle paint as the rest of the trunk, and then it disappears for good. So the video you're about to see is making that cover.
Welcome back to Allison Customs Project Car TV. I'm Jeff Allison, and thank you for watching.
The clock again here, and we'll see how long this little cover takes us. Okay, so what we're after is something just wide enough to hide all these wires. So 2 inches would be, actually 2 inches would be plenty. So if we had, let's just go 2.5 just to give us some room. Okay, so we need basically a channel upside down, and we want it to be 2.5 inches. I'm going to go inside to inside, and then we need a length. Like I said, it just needs to go back to that hump. It doesn't really need to go any further, and it barely needs to come in front of this. So we're going to go 8 inches. And it really doesn't matter whether it's inside to inside, as long as we don't use really thick metal. If we go 8 inches front to rear, this end is going to be open. And if we look at a profile, what I'm thinking we'll draw or build something like this. So we want the bottom to be 8 inches and the top to maybe be, doesn't need a lot of layback, maybe 7.5 inches to 7.25 inch, somewhere in there. And then we need a height, which this ruler is too tall. If we have a height, about 1 inch would do it, so would be fairly snug, but that's fine. So let's go 1 inch in height, and that really does need to be inside, because it's going to be tight enough. So, and then we can push like this speaker wire. These are the wires that go to the the rear deck speakers here. We can lay them alongside that instead of over the top. So that's it. That's going to be our design. Let me see if I can actually zoom in so you can see what I drew. There you go. That's pretty close. That's what we're going to go after. Let's get started. Alright, so to get the layout we want, and this is just a sketch, but we need, basically we need the 1 inch there. We need enough room to fold our metal, which is roughly 1/8 of an inch on my bender. Then we need the 2.5 inches width that we wanted. So let's see, that would be 1, 2.5 plus the 2/8. That gets us to the 1/4. And there's our other bend. There's 2.5, 1, and another 1. And that's assuming each one of these little squares is a 1/4 inch, which they are. And that puts it basically into scale for us. Now, as we get to the end of this, we need to be able to make that slope. So as we need to make that slope, the sides have to be longer than the top. So if we cut the top, well, we're not going to cut it. We're going to lay it, we're going to fold it there. And we need, depending on how much angle we want. So let's just draw the top to scale here real quick, or the profile to scale. So 1, 2, 3, 4. There's our inch. And if we want, if we're going to fold there, if we want, say, let's just go with a 1/2 inch slope. Let's see what that looks like. That's pretty steep. So 3/4 would bring it out here. And that looks a little better to my eye. So there's our plan. So we need the sides to be 3/4 of an inch longer at the bottom than the top. So coming back this way, so that's there, 1, 2, 3, there's 3/4, 3/4, and then it's going to come back to that same point. And then the top has to continue and I'm just going to use a tape measure or a ruler here because we now have an actual measurement or an actual scale drawing. So from that point to this point is 1 inch and 5/8. Sorry, 1 inch and 3/8. So this is 1 3/8 roughly. It's a little smaller than that, but that's what we're going to use. Is we're going to go all the way out 1 inch, 1 3/8 of an inch long at the top here, which I can't even draw on my paper. But we'll run that out and then cut it off, and then we'll notch out those corners. Then when we fold everything, we'll get a nice finish. Then we have to figure out how we're going to mount it. So the one option would be to leave a flange. So we had a little, it could be as small as a 1/4 inch even. Probably a little, you'd have to have a little bigger, but you could have a flange down here and you could run some screws through it. And that's the simplest form. It's not going to be the prettiest because you're going to be able to see that flange and those screws as they go back under there. The other option would be if we were looking at a front cutaway. So if we were looking straight at the front of this box, straight on at it, if underneath we put a piece of call it angle, and we can make that ourselves. If we put a piece of angle and we bolted that down to the floor, then we could have we could bolt through here. And then you wouldn't see, it would be very clean. And so I think that's the method I'm going to use, which means we'll have to, as part of this cover, we'll have to make ourselves some angle iron, you know, and it only needs maybe 3 screws down through it. And we'll need 2 pieces, roughly, you know, 7 inches long or something each. And we'll just use a couple pieces of sheet metal, 1/2 inch on a side, fold that, drill the holes, and then we'll probably for the face side, so on the sides here, we'll probably use some riv nuts. That way we can bolt through and it'll just thread in. You won't have like a sharp screw, a metal screw going in where it could get into the wires or something. So there's the generic idea of the design. So we can take that and transfer that to our sheet metal. And we have pretty good edge here and a good straight edge here. So we will measure off the top 1 3/8 of an inch. And we're going to bend on this line. Then we can come over. We needed 1 inch for our side, and we want 1/8 of an inch for the actual bend, so that's where the radius will be. And then we want to come over 2.5 inches, so 1, 2.5 plus the 1/8. My pen is dying. Plus we need 1/8 for this bend, and then we need another inch. So there's 1 plus the 1/8 plus the other 1/8. So there's our sides. Let's transfer those down here as well.
Run.
Alright, now we need these to be 7, or no, we decided 8 inches long. And we just need to set up our front. So we need a mark 3/4 of an inch out from that line. Straight edge. So we'll cut all this out, and all this out. We'll cut on that, or we'll bend on that line, and we'll cut on this line that I drew through, and we'll cut all the way to here on these lines, all the way up to the corner. And then this little piece, this will be a tab that we will use to weld the two pieces together, and we can just spot weld it or TIG or whatever we want to use. And that's it. Everything else is just bent and held together, and it just becomes a pretty basic cover. And then we'll make our little L brackets to bolt to the floor. Well, guys, I started cutting these out. And as you probably caught, excuse me. Well, I started laying these out and cutting them. And as you guys probably caught, I drew it one way, which was the correct way. And then I laid it out incorrectly so that when these folded, they'd actually be short on the bottom and long at the top. So I get to redo it. Part of the process, wasted a little bit of sheet metal. Not that big a deal, but you know, learn from my mistakes. So let's get it relayed out, and I'll get back to you as soon as I have it correct. All right, I'm back to where we should have been. I've got the notches cut out. This is cut all the way down to this point. Same on this side. So now I'm ready just to go shear this off so that I get a nice straight line, and then I will bend from there to there and down these two 1/8 inch windows that we left so that it gets a nice rolled finish. So these will both be 90-degree bends. There'll be two little 90-degree bends there, and then this will just bend to meet this angle of that line there. So I'm gonna have to go out to the other shop to do this because all those tools are out there, and then I'll come back when it's done. All right, so just to give you the idea of where we're going, and the order of operation here is we have to get these two little tabs bent in before I can bend this face down, and nothing, you know, nothing in my tool inventory as far as equipment would allow me to bend just that little piece without bending into here or something else. So it's not that big a deal. All I'm going to do is put this in the vise and bend it over, and that'll get, I really need a really tight bend, whereas this has a nice little radius on it. I hope yeah. So these have a nice little radius on them to make it nice and clean. This needs to be a really tight bend so that when this lid lays down, it can lay down right on it flush. So let me go work that problem. So I think my solution is going to actually be on the anvil here, where I can get this as close to as possible.
And then I'm going to stick a pair of pliers and finish that bend. Unless we can.
Okay, so this is the front. We're going to lay that down. As you can see, these ends go down now. And we're just going to cut these off straight with a pair of hand shears. As you can see, I kind of cut them up just a little bit so that they wouldn't ever be in the way while we're adjusting all this. So my goal now is to make these bends a little tighter, and then we'll bend down the lid. Alright, so now it's time to bend this face down. We can go back out and try and put a finger brake in there and bend it, or we can just do it what we're doing. So what I've done is just clamped a piece of angle iron in here just so I have a little narrower range to beat on this. Okay, so we ended up with a nice tight bend. We'll Put a little weld on the inside of each of those, and then I can just tap this over to, I'll be able to just tap the edge over to kind of feather it in. May even try welding it, and as you can see I was just a little long, but not bad. Maybe a 1/16, so we can take a little sander and we'll sand a little bit of that off and it'll be nice and clean. But other than that, it's ready to finish up and get in the car. We just need to make our angles to mount it. We're going to pre-drill everything with 1/8 inch drill bit. Okay, so for the 3 on the what will be the mount on the floor, the 1/8 inch will be fine. We'll use probably some self-drilling screws and just real short, like 3/8 of an inch ones, so that they'll just go through the sheet metal and that's it. Then these 2 on either end in the middle, these are going to be up on the sides, and that's where our nut zert's going to go. So we're going to go get a couple nut zerts and figure out what size that hole needs to be off of the nut zert. We'll drill those holes out. All right, so the rib nut I'm going to use has a small flange. This one's actually made out of aluminum. And when I mic it out, it comes out just under 300. So this bit's a 9/32. And it mics out that it should be too small. Whoops. So let's see what it does. And it is too small. What I need is one bit right between these, and I don't think I have them. Let's see what else we got. Okay, so what I went and found is I just got some different rib nuts, the same thread size inside, 1024, but they are a little smaller dimensionally than the aluminum ones are. So we'll run those in there. But first we got to shear this plate. So we're going to cut it here, and we're going to cut on that line, and the middle line. I'm sorry. Shear here, cut the middle, and cut this line, and then we'll fold the others, and then we can rivet those in. So take those out. We'll get this cut and made into some angles, and then we'll get these rib nuts in there. Paint it up. All right, so we got our little brackets made up. It's kind of going to all be tricky because all of this has got to be underneath and hidden, and we still got to get these lined up. Maybe easier to go ahead and mount these and then drill the holes through the cover after, because I probably, instead of just drilling a hole, I'm probably going to drill a hole and then slot it so that you can slide it down rather than have to take the screws out and try and line everything up. Just make it a little easier for installation. So yeah, let's go ahead and get these nuts zerted and we'll get them painted and installed. And they'll just get painted flat black. And then we'll get these installed and finish painting the cover and get it. We'll probably actually, before we paint the cover any deeper or any further, got the inside just kind of painted, but before we go any further with that, we'll probably go ahead and get these lined up and the holes drilled and slotted. That way when we paint it, it's done. I think I may have broke this. Yep. So, see right there, broke that arm off there. See if we can take this apart and maybe we can just weld that back in, make this usable again. So, on to a new project. I'll stop the clock. So, currently it's, I think that's coincidental. I think that's about where we were last time. Hour and 40 minutes, 53 seconds. Stop the clock here, and once I get this fixed, we'll restart the clock. We're back in business. We can restart the clock. What I had to do is those little pins that stick in there, they'd actually both broken loose. One of them just was completely free. So I took the handle apart, placed them in, got them roughly where I thought they were supposed to be in place, and then welded them and ground it flat, and took about, oh, I don't know, probably took 15 minutes, but there was probably 5 minutes worth of work. So we'll restart our clock and try and finish these this bracket up. You guys might have seen a while back I did a tool review on these, as well as some other rib nut tools, and I can tell you these are the Harbor Freight version. These are still one of the better ones I've had. They just work. You know, that's the first time I've ever had a problem, and it took, you know, because I have a welder, but it took all of a couple minutes to fix, and chances are it'll never break again, at least not in that location. It's a pretty simple tool. I mean, it's 2 arms and this whole mandrel setup. That's probably the most complicated piece of it, and it's just because there's a lot of male and female threads depending on what you're doing. So anyway, here's our brackets. We will go ahead, spray these up flat black, get them mounted in the car, and then we'll get our cover fit to them and sleeve and cut the slots so we can slide it down over it, and then we'll paint it. So I'm going to go ahead and spray these flat black, and then I'll stop the clock and let the paint dry. As you know, that's not fair to count that. I'm also going to go ahead and nip off these little corners real quick just so they're not sharp. So I'll be back as soon as the paint's dried on these and we're ready to put them in the car. Okay, so I've pre-drilled these with 1/8 inch, and then what I want to do is drill them out for the number 10 screw, which normally you just use a 3/16 screw. I want a little bit of play in here this time, and I didn't put that in the right place. So I'm going to drill them 13/64, just up a 1/64 of an inch, just to give just a little bit of room for it to wiggle around in case I missed my markings by any amount. I think I got everything lined up really well, but you know, it gives a little bit of play. We're going to make them slots anyway. Okay, so we can deburr the inside of these, and then we'll just use a cutoff wheel and just open those up to where they can just slide down on there. All right, that's it. We got our slots. I'm gonna respray the black inside there because I got fingerprints all over it because I started messing with it a little too early. And then we'll paint it to match the trunk once that dries. And then I'll get you over there so you can see it installed. Well, there you have it. Took about 2 or 3 minutes to install. And you know, it does exactly what I was after. Hides the wires, so when the speaker box is in here now, it will be those will be completely hidden and it all looks like part of the trunk. The unfortunate part is by the time we designed the box, laid it out, made a mistake, made another layout, folded it, welded it up, and then painted everything. And I didn't even count the time for painting other than just the spraying time, but I didn't count any of the dry time or anything like that. And it still took, what is that, about 2 hours and 8 minutes there to make. Now some of that, you know, I'm walking around, I'm having to go back and forth between this shop and the other shop to get certain tools. You have to go find some of the material you need, but that's all realistic. That's all real life stuff. You know, you don't always have every bit of the material you need sitting right next to where you want to get your job done. So 2 hours to make that up. Maybe realistically we could have done it in an hour and 35 or 40 minutes if I wasn't doing all the explanations. But either way, still, you know, still time, and it's still things that need to be done to make stuff look finished. So also I hope you guys will find that at least a little bit interesting, and I hope it gives you some encouragement to get out there, get stuff done, finish it the way you want it, get it all the way done to the level you're happy with, and you'll be pleased with it from now on. So thanks again for watching. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for watching Allison Customs Project Car TV. Like us on Facebook and check us out at AllisonCustomsOnline.com.